All organisms need oxygen for respiration. The bigger the organism, or the smaller its surface to volume ratio, the more complex the system needed to get it in and get carbon dioxide out. The exchange surface needs to have a large surface area, so it might have lots of folds in it, and it needs to be thin with a good blood supply too. As fish are streamlined, they have a small surface area to volume ratio, so their gill fronds or filaments make up for this. In the lamellae, blood flows in the opposite direction to that of the water flowing over them to maintain a steep concentration gradient to facilitate fast exchange of oxygen. The flowing water also keeps them apart. The fish opens its mouth, water flows in, and then it closes its mouth, increasing the pressure, and the water flows out over the gills. Insects are so small that they don't need a transport system. Instead, oxygen moves in via small tubes called spiracles by diffusion or muscle contraction, where it flows through small trachea or tracheoles to the cells where it's needed. Gases are exchanged in leaves through their stomata into the spongy mesophyll, which has lots of air gaps, providing a large surface to volume ratio for diffusion to happen across. Large organisms, like us humans, need more complex exchange systems. When your intercostal muscles and diaphragm contract, they cause the pressure in the lungs to decrease, causing air to enter into the trachea, which is held open by C rings of cartilage, then to the bronchi, bronchioles, to get to the alveoli, air sacs. These are numerous, small and lumpy, providing a massive total surface area to volume ratio. The total surface area is that of the floor space of a small house. The walls are 1 cell thick, so gas exchange happens easily into and out of the capillaries surrounding them. All of the airways contain goblet cells. These secrete mucus that traps dust and microbes. The bronchi and bronchioles are smaller than the trachea, and they contain elastic fibers that lengthen and shorten when we breathe to control the flow of air. They also have smooth muscle that opens and closes the airways as necessary. Lung volume is measured using a spirometer. Vital capacity is the maximum volume of air inhaled in a single breath. Tidal volume is the volume in or out per breath while at rest, and there's always a bit of air left in the lungs after exhaling. This is called the residual volume. Digestion is the breaking down of long molecules into shorter ones by hydrolysis. Enzymes do this. Carbohydrases break down sugar polymers. Examples include amylases, maltases, sucrases, and lactases. Lipases hydrolyze the bonds between glycerides and fatty acids. Bile helps with this by emulsifying them to form droplets, increasing the surface area for the enzymes to work on. Proteases are split into endopeptidases, exopeptidases, and dipeptidases. The smaller molecules can then be absorbed by crossing the membranes of the cells in the ileum of the small intestine by facilitated diffusion or co-transport. Haemoglobin is the protein found in red blood cells. It's responsible for transporting oxygen around the body. It consists of 2 beta chains and 2 alpha helixes, each containing a heme group which can carry 4 oxygen molecules each. Oxygen binds more tightly to haemoglobin if its partial pressure is increased. Its affinity increases. When oxygen is used for respiration, its partial pressure decreases, so haemoglobin's affinity for oxygen decreases and the oxygen is released to be used. This saturation or dissociation curve shows how its saturation changes with partial pressure. Once one oxygen molecule is bound to haemoglobin, its affinity increases. It's easier for the second one to bind to it, and so on, but the fourth one is less likely to bind just because there's a low chance of it finding a haemoglobin with 3 oxygens already bound to it, so it levels out. Fetal haemoglobin has a higher affinity for oxygen in order for enough oxygen to make it all the way to the womb, placenta, and through the umbilical cord. The higher the partial pressure of carbon dioxide, the lower haemoglobin's affinity for oxygen. Larger mammals, like us humans, have a double circulatory system. Blood enters the heart twice per cycle, once to the lungs, then again to the rest of the body. Deoxygenated blood enters through the vena cava into the right atrium, through the atrioventricular valve, which is tricuspid, 3-flapped, to the right ventricle, where it's then pumped through the pulmonary artery to the lungs. Oxygen is attached to the red blood cells, and the blood returns to the heart through the pulmonary vein into the left atrium, through the left atrioventricular valve, also known as the mitral valve, which is bicuspid, to the left ventricle, then to the body through the main artery, the aorta. As the left ventricle needs to pump blood to the body rather than just the lungs, its walls are thicker to withstand the greater pressure. The heart contracts at the start of a beat due to the sinoatrial node, pacemaker cells that produce a PD, a voltage. Both atria contract at the same time. This wave takes a moment to pass through the septum to the ventricles to trigger the atrioventricular node to cause the ventricles to contract. If it was instant, blood wouldn't have time to move through the valves. Diastole is the term given to the atria and ventricles relaxing, allowing blood to enter their chambers. Systole is when they contract. Arteries carry oxygenated blood under high pressure, apart from the pulmonary artery of course. As such, they have thick walls. They also contain smooth muscle to vary blood flow. These split into arterioles, then finally capillaries, that have one-cell thick walls for fast exchange of molecules. The deoxygenated blood flows back into venules, then veins that take it back to the heart. Veins have valves in to prevent backflow. Tissue fluid is what we call a liquid with dissolved gases and nutrients in, like carbon dioxide. The high hydrostatic pressure in the arteries forces these components out of the blood through the gaps in the walls of the capillaries into cells. Water also moves from tissue fluid to blood due to the difference in water potential. Some components of tissue fluid are processed by lymph nodes. Water enters a plant through its roots by osmosis and dissolved mineral ions by active transport. They travel upward via the xylem. In the stem, the vascular bundles are now just under the surface, with xylem on the inside, phloem on the outside, nearest the surface. These are responsible for mass transport in plants. In the leaf, you can see the vascular bundles, which look like veins. Water and minerals enter by the root hair cells. Water either enters by the symplast pathway between cells or the apoplast pathway between the root cell walls. It eventually reaches a xylem. Xylem are long continuous tubes made from dead tissue. Water evaporates out of the stomata of leaves, drawing water and dissolved mineral ions upward through the xylem. This is transpiration. As water molecules have cohesion, they're slightly sticky due to hydrogen bonding. It has surface tension. It can move up the xylem by capillary action. The rate of transpiration can be measured using a potometer, where we measure how far a bubble in water has moved through a tube. The rate of transpiration increases with increased temperature, lower humidity, faster air movement, increased total surface area of leaves and density of stomata, and increased water available to the roots. Translocation, on the other hand, is the transport of nutrient molecules like sucrose up and down a plant through phloem, and it's more complicated than transpiration. For starters, phloem consists of chains of living cells. First, sucrose from a source cell enters the phloem by active loading, a type of co-transport and facilitated diffusion involving the movement of hydrogen ions and proteins which bring sucrose molecules into the companion cells. They then diffuse down the concentration gradient into the sieve tube elements. When this happens, a water potential gradient is produced and water enters the phloem from a xylem by osmosis. This pressure moves the water and sucrose along the phloem to where there's a higher water potential, and it osmoses back into the phloem and sucrose is moved into the sink cell where it's needed. Evidence for this includes sap being pushed out of a freshly cut stem, swelling due to increased sugar solution if a ring is cut into a tree, and radioactive tracer experiments that show where the sugar moves. So I hope you found that helpful. Leave a like and a comment if you did, and don't forget to check out our revision app to help you test your knowledge. Links in description.